was my 25th birthday. I stood at the edge of the dance floor, a black feathered mask covering the upper half of my face, a glass of cold Chapman sweating between my fingers. Nobody knew me here. That was the point. I watched the bodies move, men pressed against men, no apology, no explanation, just freedom. I set my glass down and walked into the crowd. The beat dropped and I let it take me. My eyes closed. My hips found the rhythm. I forgot about the church. I forgot about my mother's prayers. I forgot about everything except the bass in my chest and the heat of the room against my skin. Then I felt him. He didn't grab me. He didn't announce himself. He simply appeared behind me like the music had conjured him. Slow, deliberate, intentional. His hands found my waist with a confidence that made my breath catch. He moved with the song like he had written it, chest against my back, his breath warm near my ear. I could feel him smiling without seeing his face. I turned slightly. A gold and black mask. Sharp jawline. Cologne that smelled like cedarwood and something dangerously. Familiar Dot, we moved together like we had always known each other's. Rhythm Dot, and when he leaned down and pressed his lips softly against mine for the very first time, I thought, this is the best birthday I have ever had. I did not yet know that the man behind that gold mask would change every single thing.
If you're coming across this channel for the very first time, please do well to subscribe, like, and share.
The room upstairs was quieter, just the muffled heartbeat of the music below and the sound of our breathing. He closed the door behind us, and the city outside the window glittered like scattered prayers. We stood close, still riding the electricity of the dance floor. His gold mask caught the dim light. Mine, I imagined, made me look like someone I was still learning to be. He reached out first, Dot, slowly, carefully, with fingers that trembled just slightly. He lifted his mask from his face. I stopped breathing. I knew that face. I had seen it every Sunday from 3 rows behind. I had watched it bow in prayer, watched it sing worship with closed eyes and raised hands. I had quietly admired it and immediately felt guilty each time. Johnson Adeyemi, Pastor Emmanuel Adeyemi's only son, choir member, Sunday school teacher, the most untouchable person in my entire world. He was staring at me now, eyes wide, chest rising and falling fast. I removed my own mask. The silence between us was catastrophic. Peter? He whispered. Johnson, I said back, and his name tasted different outside of church. For a long moment, neither of us moved. Then he laughed, short, disbelieving, almost broken, and pressed the back of his hand to his mouth. I sat on the edge of the bed because my legs had made that decision for me. Of all the people, he said quietly. Of all the nights. I replied. We looked at each other across that small, dim room, and something enormous and terrifying settled between us. Not shame. Not yet. Just recognition. The dangerous kind, the kind that tells you the secret you have been keeping, is no longer only yours. He sat beside me. Our shoulders touched. Happy birthday, Johnson said softly. I turned to look at him, this pastor's son with honest eyes and cedarwood cologne. Thank you, I whispered. Calvary Redemption Church had never felt smaller. I sat in my usual spot, 3rd row from the back left side. The usher had handed me a bulletin and a smile, and I had given her neither back in return. My hands were folded in my lap, but my mind was absolutely nowhere near the building. Johnson walked in at exactly 9:45, the way he always did. Dark suit, white shirt, no tie. Bible tucked under his arm. His mother touched his shoulder as he passed her. He smiled at her, then moved toward the choir stand. His eyes swept the congregation. They found mine. 1 second. Maybe 2. Then he looked away, opened his Bible, and began talking to the young man beside him as though I was simply another face in the room. I exhaled. That was how it would be then. I understood. I respected it. I was doing the same thing. Was I not? I had sat through the opening prayer without hearing a single word. I had clapped during praise and worship like a man performing normalcy for an audience. Pastor Adeyemi mounted the pulpit. big and commanding, his voice filling every corner of the hall. "God sees everything," he declared, and I felt it land directly on my chest. I almost laughed. I pressed my lips together instead. During announcements, Johnson stood to remind the congregation about the midweek service. His voice was steady, practiced. He gestured with his hands, made a small joke that earned laughter, smiled his pastor's son smile. He was so good at this, so was I supposed. After service, there was the usual cluster of handshakes and greetings near the exit. I was moving toward the door when someone touched my arm. I turned. Johnson stood close. People moving around us like a river around two stones. "Peace be with you, Brother Peter," he said formally. Hand extended. I shook it. His grip lasted 1 second longer than necessary. "And with you," I said quietly. He nodded once and walked away. Stood there, holding the ghost of his handshake and wondering how long we could both pretend that nothing in the world had changed. It came on a Wednesday evening at 8:47 p.m. Unknown number. The DJ plays better on Thursdays. Just in case you were wondering, I sat up from my bed. Read it twice. 3 times I typed back, "Who is this?" 3 dots appeared. Disappeared? Appeared again. You already know. I did know. I saved the number under the name Yeah and stared at the ceiling for a long time before I typed anything else. That's a dangerous text to send, Johnson. I know. I sent it anyway. I smiled in the dark of my room, alone, where it was safe to smile like that. Why? I asked. His reply took longer this time, because I haven't stopped thinking about that night. Because Sunday was the hardest service I have ever sat through. Because you looked at me for 2 seconds, and it felt louder than my father's entire sermon. I read it 3 times. My heart was doing something embarrassing. "Johnson, I'm not asking for anything. Peter, I just needed to say it to someone who would understand. And you're the only one who can." That was the thing, wasn't it? We were the only ones for each other in this specific way. The only ones who carried the same particular secret in the same particular building, surrounded by the same particular people. "I understand." I typed back. "I understand completely." "Thursday," he said. "Same place. Different masks if you want. Or none at all." I looked at the name on my screen. Pastor's son. Choir member. The most complicated person I had ever kissed. Thursday. I replied. I put my phone face down on the pillow beside me and lay in the dark, listening to the sound of something beginning that I had no idea how to stop. I wasn't sure I wanted to. We arrived separately. That had been the agreement. I got there first, found a corner table with a sight line to the door, and ordered a drink I barely touched. The music was different on Thursdays, slower in places, more intentional, like it was designed for conversations bodies wanted to have. Johnson walked in at 11:10. No mask this time. Neither of us wore one. He spotted me immediately, and something in his face shifted. Relief, maybe. Or the specific kind of happiness a person tries to keep small, because they are not yet sure they're allowed to have it. He sat across from me. "You came," he said. "You doubted?" "A little," he admitted, and that honesty was so unexpected that I laughed genuinely for the first time in days. We talked for 2 hours. Not about the church. Not about our families. We talked about ourselves, the versions we kept locked away. Johnson told me he had known since secondary school that there had been one other person, briefly years ago, and it had ended badly and quietly. He told me he loved music but had joined the choir because it was the only acceptable reason to feel something that intensely in public. I told him about the loneliness, the way I had perfected the art of being present and invisible at the same time. The birthday tradition I had invented for myself, one night, once a year, to simply exist without apology. "And I ruined it," he said, grinning. "You improved it significantly," I said. The dance floor eventually called us. We moved together differently this time. No masks, no strangers, no performance. Just 2 young men from the same church, in a city that was asleep, holding something fragile and real between them. When he leaned his forehead against mine, near the end of the night, Eyes closed, I understood that whatever this was, it had already moved past the place where either of us could turn back. May became June, and our Thursdays became sacred. We built a careful, hidden life with great precision. At church, we were nothing to each other. A nod, a handshake, Brother Peter and Brother Johnson, pleasant and appropriate and completely convincing. I watched him lead prayer from the front of the hall and kept my face arranged in an expression of ordinary attention. But Thursday nights belonged to us entirely. We stopped needing the crowd of Club Nor after a while. Sometimes we sat in his car parked along Third Mainland Bridge. The Lagos night around us, music low, talking until 2 in the morning. Sometimes we cooked together in my apartment, jollof rice, and arguments about seasoning and laughter that felt like something I had been storing up for years. He brought me things. Small things. A book he thought I would love. A bottle of the cologne he wore, because I had mentioned once that I liked it. A handwritten note slipped into my palm after Sunday service, just 4 words. Thursday cannot come faster. I kept every note in a box under my bed. One evening he arrived at my door unannounced, still in his church clothes from a Tuesday evening rehearsal, and he looked so undone by something that I stepped aside and let him in without asking. He sat on my kitchen floor with his back against the cabinet, and I sat beside him, and neither of us spoke for a long time. My father preached on. "Unnatural desire tonight," he said. Finally, I reached over and took his hand. He looked at our joined hands for a moment, then leaned his head on my shoulder. "I love you," he said, quietly and plainly, as though he had been working up to it for weeks. "I know it is complicated. I know this is not simple. But I need you to know the night was very still. I love you too, Johnson," I said. He tightened his hand around mine. It started innocently enough. Midweek service had run long. The associate pastor had gone off script and taken the sermon 20 minutes past its scheduled end, which meant the hall was slow to clear, people standing in clusters. The kind of unhurried midweek fellowship that could last another hour if nobody made a move. I had hung back near the notice board, pretending to read announcements I had already memorized, waiting for the crowd to thin before I left. It was a habit. Crowds after service required too much performance. Johnson appeared beside me. "The one about the welfare drive has been up there for 6 weeks, he said quietly, nodding at the board. 7, I replied. He laughed under his breath. We stood side by side, looking at the board, not at each other. Around us, conversations moved and ebbed. Someone switched off the stage lights. The hall grew dimmer, more intimate without intending to. "I missed you," he said. "Very low. Service was 4 days ago," I said back. "I know." The corridor beside the notice board led to the small storeroom used for children's ministry supplies. Johnson had the key. He coordinated Sunday school resources. Without discussing it, without planning it, we drifted slightly left, and the door opened and closed behind us. In the dark dot, it was reckless. We both knew it. He found my face with his hands in the darkness and kissed me slowly. The kind of kiss that had been building since Sunday, since the week before, since the beginning of all of this. I held onto his lapels like the ground was uncertain. We stood in the dark among Sunday school materials, 2 men deeply in love and deeply hidden, and for those few minutes the entire complicated weight of our lives lifted completely. Then, footsteps in the corridor. We separated, straightened, waited. The footsteps passed. Johnson exhaled against my forehead. "Thursday," he whispered. "Thursday," I agreed. July arrived, and the heat brought restlessness with it. I began noticing things. The way Deacon Fatoki watched Johnson a little too carefully after service. The way Johnson's mother had started asking him questions about his Thursday evenings at dinner. He had told me this, his voice stripped of its usual calm. The way nothing we were carrying could remain invisible forever, inside a community that prided itself on knowing everyone's business. I was afraid. I would not pretend otherwise, Johnson was afraid, too, though he wore it differently, quieter, more controlled, the way he had learned to be from years of being a pastor's son under a congregation's permanent gaze. "We should be more careful," I said one Thursday in his car. "We are already very careful," he said. "More careful than that." He turned and looked at me and said, "Peter, at some point careful becomes disappearing. I am not willing to disappear." That silenced me, because I understood it, because I had been disappearing in various ways for 25 years, but the cracks were already forming. I could feel them. On a Sunday in the third week of July, I arrived at church to find a strange tension already settled in the room. Small whispers, averted eyes. Johnson was at the front, standing beside his father, with an expression I had never seen on his face before, sealed, like a house with all its windows shut. He did not look for me when he scanned the room. That frightened me more than anything else. After service, I waited near the car park. He came out 20 minutes after the crowd had cleared, still holding his Bible, his jaw tight. "They found the notes," he said. My stomach dropped. "How?" "My mother. She wasn't snooping, Peter. She was changing my sheets and the box." He stopped, breathed. "She didn't read them all, but she read enough." The Lagos afternoon burned around us, and I felt the walls closing in. It happened on a Sunday. The service had been quiet in that specific way that means something underneath is not quiet at all. Pastor Adeyemi had preached well. He always preached well, but there was a rigidity in his posture, a controlled precision to every word that felt directed. Johnson sat in the choir stand with his eyes fixed forward. He had warned me the night before with a text. "Tomorrow will be difficult. Whatever happens, do not react." I did not know what I was supposed to be not reacting to. I found out at the end of service. Pastor Adeyemi asked the congregation to remain seated. Johnson rose from the choir stand and walked to the front. I felt the shift in the room immediately, everyone sensing something significant was about to occur. "There are things," the pastor began, his voice low and immense, "that this family will not accommodate." I watched Johnson stand there with his hands clasped before him, facing his father, facing the congregation. "Johnson," the pastor turned to his son, "I want you to tell these people what you told me last night." The silence was absolute. Johnson lifted his head. And then, instead of the confession of wrongdoing his father was clearly expecting, Johnson said, "I told my father last night that I am in love, that I have been in love for months, that the person I love is sitting in this church right now, and that I have never in my life been more certain of anything." Murmuring broke through the room like a wave. "Johnson," his father's voice was a warning. "His name is Peter," Johnson said clearly, "and I am not ashamed." I rose to my feet before I made the decision to do so. Across the hall, across every staring face and sharp intake of breath, Johnson found my eyes. He smiled. Not his pastor's son smile. His actual smile. It was not clean or cinematic. The weeks that followed were some of the hardest either of us had ever lived. Johnson's father did not speak to him. His mother wept quietly for days. Members of Calvary Redemption called with opinions that arrived disguised as concern. There were meetings. There were interventions. There were prayers conducted over us, at us, around us, without our permission. I lost 3 friendships in the first week. Alone, we did not crumble. We sat in my apartment on a Tuesday night with takeaway containers between us and the weight of everything pressing down. And we talked honestly about what came next. Not in theory, practically, plainly. "I cannot stay in that church," Johnson said. "I know," I said. "I cannot stay in this city and be what they want me to be. Peter, I have spent my entire life being what this city needs from me. I'm finished." I reached across the containers and covered his hand with mine. "There's a job offer I've been sitting on," I said. "Port Harcourt. Solid architecture firm." I kept putting it off. He looked at me. "I'm not putting it off anymore." I said, "His eyes did something complicated. that eventually settled into something that looked very much like peace. I don't want to just follow you, he said. I want to go with you. That's different. I know the difference, I told him. We sat with that for a while, the decision settling around us like something that had always been waiting to be made. Johnson called his mother 2 days later. The conversation lasted a long time. It did not fix everything, but she said before she hung up, I love you. That does not change. And Johnson held those words like currency for the difficult days ahead. We began packing.
Port Harcourt received us without ceremony. The apartment we found was modest and bright, with large windows and a mango tree visible from the kitchen that Johnson declared immediately was a sign. We painted the front room together on our first weekend, got paint on each other, ordered pepper soup from the place around the corner, and ate on the floor because the furniture hadn't arrived yet. It was the happiest evening of my life up to that point. Johnson found a music school within the month. He taught composition to teenagers on Saturday mornings with an intensity that made his students adore him. He sang in the apartment without restraint, loud and unworried, and the sound of it was the greatest luxury I had ever been given. I joined the architecture firm and threw myself into work that finally felt like mine. I came home in the evenings, the lights already on, and something cooking, and a person who had been waiting, not with need but with want, the beautiful, uncomplicated one of someone who chose you simply because they wished to. We found a small, affirming church an hour from home. Nobody knew us. Nobody's father was at the pulpit. We sat in the back row on Sunday mornings and worshiped quietly and held the complicated relationship between our faith and our love in our own hands, where it belonged. Some Sundays were still hard. Faith is not a simple country, but we navigated it together. On the evening of my 26th birthday, exactly 1 year after the mass dance that began everything, Johnson cooked jollof rice badly and decorated the apartment with streamers he had bought from a roadside seller and made me close my eyes before I entered the living room. When I opened them, it was just him, standing there, grinning, holding a cupcake with one candle. Happy birthday, Peter, he said. I looked at Johnson Adeyemi, pastor's son, choir boy, the man behind the gold mask, and thought about every door we had walked through to arrive in this room. Thank you, I said, meaning everything. I blew out the candle.
And that, my loves, is the story of Peter and Johnson, two souls hiding in plain sight, finding each other in the most unexpected place, and choosing love loudly when it mattered most. Love is never as complicated as the world makes it. It is the world that is complicated. Love itself is simple. It finds you in a crowded room, behind a mask, on your birthday, when you least expect it. I hope this story touched something real in you. I hope it made you feel seen or warm or simply reminded you that happy endings are not fairy tales. They are decisions made daily by brave people. If this story moved you, here is how you can show some love. Like this post, share it with someone who needs a love story today, and subscribe so you never miss a new story. Also, join the membership for exclusive early access to full stories and member only content you will not find anywhere else. Your support is what keeps the stories alive and coming.